about that worship team today? Awesome. Awesome job. How about that Anson that started off? Yeah. Telling you, these guys know how to do this. Hey, I'm excited today. I'm telling you right now, if you're wondering what I'm doing up here, I'm scrolling through my notes because I just happen to think, I wonder if people wonder what I'm doing all the time, fingering that screen, but I am not playing bingo or anything up here, but anyways, I was trying to filter out the jokes that were resident there for a second. I'm excited today. We've been doing a series called Just for Today. It's based on Mark Batterson's book called Win the Day. And Mark Batterson, as we mentioned before, prolific writer. He is a New York Times bestseller author, over 20 books to his credit so far. Pastors a large church in Washington, D.C. Actually, it's one church with, I think, 7 campuses or something like that, called National Community Church. And this book is his latest book, and it's really, really a good one. I hope you've been enjoying it. I hope you picked up a copy. I'm going to finish giving away a case of these things today. I personally bought a case. Okay, you can have it. So Tina, you get the first one. There you go. Awesome. Yeah. And so then we've been giving them away because I don't do this very often. I don't try to sell books for authors, but this one is a good one. It's a game changer. There's some really good principles there I think are going to be very, very helpful in your walk and in your journey, in your spiritual journey. So we're excited about that. Hey, we're going to, let me get a disclaimer out of the way. I always forget because we're trying to stay current with this. From the beginning of this pandemic, about a year and a half ago, we've tried to be right on course with all the rules and regulations. We've erred maybe on the side of caution. Some people, we probably were too cautious, but that's all right. Others, I'm sure we were not cautious enough. I don't know how you strike a balance, but CDC guidelines tell us that if you've been fully vaccinated, you do not need to wear a mask. And so we are not going to be checking. Just consider this Costco, okay? You're on your own. We're not going to check vaccination cards at the door, and use your own common sense. Whatever your comfort level is, hey, we want to honor that. There's not going to be any side glances whether you have a mask on or not. It doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter to you. These are brothers and sisters in Christ. Whatever your comfort zone is, we want to honor that. But that's why some of us are not wearing masks, because we've been fully vaccinated. So I got to give a book away. And man, all the hands are going up. Here's the problem. I did it in the first gathering. I don't want to see you guys in the building getting on there in the chat room saying, I want the book. Okay, I know how you are. I've seen you guys operate. No, so the first one online that says, hey, I want that book, you get it. Larry Robbins, I think, was in our first gathering. He was the first one, so we're going to be shipping. Because some of these we may have to ship. If you are the first one online to say, I want that book, and you get it, you can either pick it up at the office or we'll mail it to you, because our audience is in Washington, it's in Texas, it used to be in North Carolina, now it's in Denver, families that are moved. So we got people all over. We will ship this to you if you're the first one online. And I know you're seeing 2 books up here. I just gave away one, but the other one I gave away in the first gathering. So I am sorry. That's all the books I have to give away today. But it was fun. I enjoyed it. I gave away some in the between times too, in the middle. I just can't. You were terrible Christmas secret people. Like, you know, I can't hold it. I mean, I'm like, I want to tell people like at December 15th what I've got them for Christmas. But anyways, we had a lot of fun. Pick up the book. It's definitely worth the read. I'm getting no kickbacks from that, but it's definitely a game changer, and you want to see the God's work in your life. So let me just say this too, that we're talking, and we've been focusing on the spiritual principles that are in this book. But these principles apply everywhere in life, whether it's relationships, finances, physical health, your job, professional development. I mean, you name it, these principles will help you learn how to live a fuller, more robust life in general. And so please pick it up and give it a look. There's 7 habits, that we're focusing on, because the book says seven daily habits to help you stress less and accomplish more. That sounds pretty good, right? And so the 7 habits are this: flip the script. We've already covered these. Flip the script, kiss the wave, eat the frog. I know they're weird, but eat the frog, based on Mark Twain's famous quote from years ago: if you have to eat a live frog, eat it first thing in the morning, because get the hard things out of the way. And then fly the kite. Man, that one really, I've been riding that one all week long. Laying kite string. If you miss these, we're trying to get them. We're having some issues with our platform. We're hopefully getting that ironed out, but where we can actually post these to our YouTube channel, so they will be available at some point. And if you missed them, please go back and look at them. I think it'd be worth your while. But fly the kite, talking about laying down kite strings that turn into suspension bridges. God wants to do some things in your life. You got to start small. Think big, but start small, and let God work in your life. Today, we're going to focus on one habit and one only, because next week we're going to finish the last 2, which is wind the clock and seed the clouds. But today we're going to be talking about cut the rope, and we'll explain what that means in just a moment. Also, let me tell you that we will be doing communion at the end of the service today. Feels like tonight. We started early this morning. But if you did not pick up your communion emblems on the way in, that's totally fine. We have people that will serve you right now. So if you need communion emblems, you didn't pick them up, just lift your hand, hold it up, and we got people. Thank you, Ray, and Dave Cookman will help out with that. They will get those to you. If you're at home, go to the kitchen and find something. Don't get sidetracked. Come back to us, but go get something that you can hold on to, and we'll do that at the end. So just for today, this series, just for the day, and today we're going to focus on habit number 5, cut the rope. And it's subtitled here, playing it safe is risky. Playing it safe is risky, and we know that. We got some down here too, Dave. I don't know if we got some over here on this side, if you can, or whoever has those. They're coming, guys. Dave and Valerie over there need some. We're talking about imagining unborn tomorrows. We started off by talking about burying dead yesterdays, and that's so important, because you can't move forward till you deal with and close off the past and let it go. And then last week we talked about win the day, making the most of that 24 hours. We've been talking a lot the last few weeks about the power of 24, or living life in day-tight compartments. That's a phrase that was coined a long time ago, meaning live for today. How many of you know, I know the answer to this because I'm looking at friends that I know you understand exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about just for today. The question we've been asking ourselves all along is this: can you do it for 24 hours? These changes that we need to make in our lives, these things that God is calling us out on and saying, hey, these things need to be dealt with. Can you do it for 24 hours? Because here's what happens. If you can do it for 24 hours, then you do it again for 24 hours, then you do it again. Pretty soon you stack up enough of those 24 hours, and you look back and you're taking a coin for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years of recovery, because God has done some amazing things in your life. We haven't said it for a while, but we often say around here there's only 2 people in the world: those that are in recovery, and those that need to be. Because we all have issues, right? We all have issues, and so we stack up these 24 just for today. We stack up 24 hours worth of choices, and God begin to bless and open up new adventures. So today we want to launch in, and next week we'll wrap it up. We want to launch into this part 3, which is imagine unborn tomorrows. Imagine, it's my favorite part. What I'm going to share with you today is probably my favorite part of this whole book, because it's such an important principle to live by. Mark Batterson, in his book, I'm just going to read you a little paragraph that he states because he says it so well. He says, in part 3, that's where we are today, we turn our full attention to the future. It's time to explore the habits that will help us imagine unborn tomorrows, cut the rope, wind the clock, seed the clouds. We live our lives forward. Listen to this statement. I think this is really intriguing. we live our lives forward, but God is working in our lives backward. Think about that for a second. And I'll explain this more in just a second, but let it sink in. We live our lives forward, but God is working in our lives backward. Ephesians 2:10 says this: we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works. Look at that next line. Which God has prepared in advance. Which God has prepared in advance. So Mark says, translation, God is setting you up. When God gives you a vision, he makes provision. In other words, we could say it this way: God always begins with the end in mind. God always begins with the end in mind. So let me illustrate that, and we don't have time to go back through all of creation, but let me just remind you, during creation, God spoke and separated the waters from the sea, the dry ground. Years later, because God always begins with the end in mind. Years later, he separated the Red Sea and made a sidewalk through a seaway for his people to walk across on dry ground. See, God always starts with the end in mind. And we need to look at that and say to ourselves, hey, maybe I need to have more of an eternal perspective in life. Maybe I need to look in my spiritual life with the end in mind and not just be so focused on where I'm at right now and be so overwhelmed by where I'm at right now, so encompassed by what I'm doing right this minute that I forget that there's a heaven at the end of this thing. You know, we can live a happier life today knowing that when we get to the end of the line, guess what? We get to go to heaven. And we need to do that. We need to live our lives with the end in mind. Let me just illustrate this for you, because today we're going to be talking about cut the rope. Where did we get that phrase? Let me take us back to 1853 for a moment. In 1853, the United States of America hosted, for the first time in America, we hosted the World's Fair in New York City. Now, it wasn't the first World's Fair, but it was the first one that we had hosted as American citizen. And they set up this huge exhibit hall, this is an artist's rendering. It's not an actual photograph, obviously, but it's an artist's rendering of what they call the Crystal Palace. Inside this huge exhibit hall, all the latest and greatest inventions were on display, and all the things that people wanted to demonstrate and show forth were on exhibit in this Crystal Palace. Now, let me just take you to a man in specific, a guy named Elisha Otis. Elisha Otis. Now, he is struggling, and he had, if you want an interesting study in somebody's life, just Google Elisha Otis, and you'll see that this guy struggled, try to find he's a very ingenious, creative, inventive mind. He was one of the first, created one of the first, basically you could call it robotic turning machines that turned bed style, poster bed rails and stuff. He had some really ingenious thoughts, but he struggled trying to find that one thing, that sweet spot that would provide stability for his family. And he had several different attempts at different things. I think he even owned a sawmill at one point and different things, and was very innovative. But all of a sudden, he decided, you know what, I'm going to take a different task. And he decided that he was going to invent an elevator safety brake. Now, in 1853, there were primitive forms of elevators as such, but they were not perfected, and they certainly weren't widespread in use, mainly because they were prone to fail. The lines and the ropes that they used to hoist these platforms would wear and fray at the pulley system and other things. And so obviously it was very, very dangerous, especially when you had a load of equipment and or people on there. They didn't want to be hoisting those people up and then have the rope break and things would crash to the ground. So in his ingenious, creative mind, he developed a safety brake for that very thing. And in 1853, he was trying to market the safety brake to really open up this idea of elevators. And some of you are thinking, man, Otis, that name sounds familiar. I'll tell you why, because you've never stepped in an elevator that didn't say Otis Elevator Systems on it. But Elisha Otis was trying to market this, and skeptics said, we don't want anything to do with that. Elevators are risky business. And so, okay, I can't resist. He just couldn't get this thing off the ground. He was selling this to people, and they weren't buying it. It's like, nope, not going to happen. And so he thought, what am I going to do? How am I going to launch this? Because I know this works. And so in 1853, World's Fair, he decides inside the Crystal Palace, I'm going to get everybody's attention. So what he did is he set up an elevator in the Crystal Palace. Here's an artist rendering of that right here. And so he put this elevated platform up there, a primitive version of what we today know as an elevator. And he stationed a man. You can see him up at the top there. This guy has a knife in his hand, but the actual original, in the real life situation, he had an axe in his hand. And he got everybody's attention. He's up high enough in that huge pavilion that everybody could see him, got their attention. And when he got everybody's attention, he hollered out to the man he'd stationed up above and said, cut the rope. The axe man took the axe that he'd prepared, cut the rope, and the platform fell a few feet. The gasp of the crowd was noticeable and loud in that building as everybody thought they were going to witness a huge tragedy, as this thing certainly would fall pell-mell to the ground, but it didn't, because the safety brake worked. And moments later, standing there in the safety of that safety brake, he hollered out to the crowd, ladies and gentlemen, all safe, all safe. And he took a lot of orders that week for safety brakes on elevators. And the rest is history, as they say. You see, it sounds risky. It sounds risky, but playing it safe isn't always safe. Playing it safe isn't always safe. And sometimes God calls us to do things that are beyond our scope of reasoning, and we think, it's too risky. I don't want to chance that. Maybe it was a call that God had early on in your life, but now you're saying, I can't cut the rope because, man, I got a family, I got a career, I got obligations, I got debts, and you have all kinds of ways to explain away why you can't follow the Lord's plan for your life. Can I just encourage you today, cut the rope. Cut the rope. Now listen, when I say cut the rope, I'm not talking about recklessness. I'm not talking about foolishness. I own several of those records in my lifetime, and my body pays the price to this day. I'm talking about calculated risk, where you sit down. The Bible talks about, Jesus talked about it, said, no one would set out to build a house without first calculating the cost. Because, you know, the song we learned in children's church, the wise man built his house upon the rock, the foolish man built his house upon the sand. I'm talking about cutting the rope in a sense that when God puts a call on your life, when God gives you a daring idea, I'm looking around this room, I know people, I could start calling out people that cut the rope and took a chance, and today they've got a business, or they've got an opportunity, or they've got a relationship, or they've got all these other things because they took the chance, they felt God's leading, they felt God's call, they took the chance, they cut the rope, and the rest is history, as they say. Let me just give you some perspective here. When Elisha Otis pulled this crazy stunt in 1853, there was a handful of buildings in New York City. And we're using New York City because it was the hub of the then known world, especially as far as the United States was concerned. There was a handful of buildings that were over 5 stories tall. And you can imagine why. Because nobody wanted to crawl more than 5 stories to get to the top. But an elevator changes everything. An elevator changes everything. In 1854, just a year later, Otis has installed his elevator in a building on Broadway, and everything changed from that moment on. So look at this. 1854, he installs his first elevator on Broadway, in a building on Broadway. In 1890, just 6 years later, there were 10 buildings taller than 10 stories in New York City. 10 years later than that, 1900, there were 65 buildings. There were 65 that were 20 stories or taller. And in 1908, just a few short years later, there was 538 buildings that qualified as skyscrapers. The definition of skyscrapers is 20 stories or more. Last count, this is mind-boggling, last count, New York City, just New York City, had 58,000 elevators making 11 billion, with a B, trips every single year. Because Otis cut the rope, and it changed everything. Cutting the rope is taking calculated risk. What is God calling you to do today? Is there a risk that God is calling you to? And you're just saying, I think I just like my own, I'm used to this. It's routine. I feel comfortable. I don't have to get scared by new things. Can I just tell you that it's not always safe to not take risks? In fact, I was thinking about this earlier this week, and I thought of Matthew, the story that we all know. We learned it probably in children's church or nursery school. A story, you remember the story of Peter and the disciples are out on the water. Like, it seems like out on the water wasn't always a good place for them to be. When Jesus was in the boat, it was fine, but in this particular occasion, in Matthew 14, Jesus is not in the boat with them. He said, I'm going to go up and pray for a while. You guys go ahead and head across. None of them thought to say, how are we going to meet you there? We're taking the boat. But, well, let's just pick it up. Matthew 14, verse 24, it says this. Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble far away from land, for a strong wind had risen, and they were fighting heavy waves. And this brings chills in my spine even to this day. There's a reason why you should not be in a 12-foot open bow boat taking 9-foot swells over the bar, and you don't even know where the safety jackets are. First question Terry used to always ask me is, did you put your life jackets on? No. And I read this passage, I get a little, that feeling comes over me again, They're scared. Let me tell you from experience. These guys are terrified. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, don't be afraid. Take courage. I'm here. And Peter, God bless Peter. Can you relate to Peter? I can. He's the guy that opens his mouth first and then thinks. He's the guy that, somebody said he had tattooed on his forehead. Take out left foot, insert right. Because he seemed like he always had his foot in his mouth. But he says this, he cries out and says, then Peter called out, Lord, if that's really you, tell me to come to you, walking on the water. And Jesus goes, come on. I guarantee you, that's not what Peter wanted to hear when he said that. But, look at verse 29. It said, Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on water toward Jesus. Wow, Peter cut the rope. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink, and he cried out, save me, Lord. Jesus immediately, I love that word, immediately. Jesus immediately reached out, grabbed him, and said, you have so little faith. Why do you doubt me? Can I just say to you today, when God is calling you to cut the rope, take the risk, follow his leading, it's spooky as all get out. Can I just tell you that don't hear Jesus saying in the background, you have so little faith. Why do you doubt me? Has he ever let us down? Joy, I bet you more than one time when you're growing up, you saying, never failed me yet. Never failed me yet. Jesus' love has never failed me yet. This one thing I know, that wherever I go, Jesus' love has never failed me yet. How many never heard that song before? What were you guys doing? I just sang it for you, the whole thing. Let's sing it together. Never failed me yet. Never failed me yet. Jesus' love has never failed me yet. This one thing I know, that wherever I go, Jesus' love has never failed me yet. You know, the last thing I want to hear Jesus say to me is, why do you doubt me? See, the only way we can walk on water is to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus. And the winds and the waves will blow, and there will be times that we will question, did I really hear from God? Oh, the enemy's, he capitalizes on that. He'll tell you all the reasons you can't make it. He'll tell you all the reasons you shouldn't step out of the boat. Listen, we give Peter a bad time, and we harangue him for falling apart after he got out there. But there was 11 guys white-knuckling the side of the boat that never got their feet wet. I want to climb out of the boat. I want to take the chance. I want to cut the rope. Like that. Brave prayer. Believing God with you today. A principle called adjacent possible. Have you ever heard that phrase before? Adjacent possible. It's very likely you haven't heard it. It's a phrase that was coined by an evolutionary biologist named Stuart Kaufman. I know all of you have been reading all the stuff that he puts out. Of that. See, the elevator is a great way to illustrate this concept of adjacent possible. Without the elevator, skyscrapers would not have been possible. So, elevators, sure, but it's like, what is it, half a mile high or something? This elevator, you can see it on the ground floor, and you can ride up, I think it's 6 elevators to the top, that half-mile-high building, and see it set again. Same sunset. Was pastoring in Richmond, California, a place called Hilton. Had gone down the tubes, and it was amazing and wonderful. I helped him build on it, and I helped sing and teach 20 miles, 60 minutes in that traffic to get there. And so on weekends when I'd come home, well, guess what? Just a couple exits down the road at Central Assembly of God was a pastor named Robert Senner, who pastored Central Assembly of California. They, Lorraine, Bob, were my adjacent possible. They went to the same high school together, along with 1,500 other students. And they met and found each other, became close friends, because both of their dads pastored Assembly of God churches 2 exits apart in the Richmond Bay Area. I first was introduced to Terry, my wife, now, and all I saw when we went by there to drop something off at my cousin's best friend's house was a pair of legs and some short shorts. Well, listen, don't go there. Okay, it wasn't lustful. I just saw these tan legs, thought I'd really like to see the rest of that. That was my adjacent possible. Because that pair of legs and I, in a month, have been married 43 years. You see where I'm going with this? If there wasn't my cousin Terry, there wouldn't have been my wife Terry. One thing led to the other. Let me just bring it home for you this morning and tell you this. Sometimes God closes doors in our lives in order to open other doors, or what we might call adjacent possible. See, we're sure, we're absolutely sure that this is God's plan for our life. And then it isn't. And we're scratching our heads thinking, wait a minute, What is God doing? What is God? Well, let me just take you to the Apostle Paul has experienced that very thing, as a matter of fact, on more than one occasion. But let's look at Acts chapter 16 for a moment, verses 7 and 9, and I'll give you an example of adjacent possible. Here it is. Then coming to the borders of Mysia, they, Paul and his band of evangelists, headed north for the province of Bithynia. But again, the standing there pleading with him, northern Greece was not where they were headed. Please, if God hadn't closed the door on Bithynia, Macedonia never would have heard the gospel, most likely. But you see, Bithynia was Paul's plan A, but Macedonia was God's plan A. Is adjacent possible. Oftentimes, he's letting us down. Have you ever had those moments in your life where you felt like, you know what? It just feels like God turned the corner too fast, and I fell out of the truck. My dad had what we used to call the A&W truck. Some of you are old enough to know why. It was an old Ford truck. I don't know what that thing is, 40s or something. It was an old and the root beer truck or the A&W truck, because the body of the thing was bright yellow and the running boards and the fender wells were brown. Who does that? We went around the corner going from Elliott Street onto Main Street, and my dad took the corner pretty fast. Doug was sitting on the door looking at the road, and my dad, the compassionate being that he was, said, "Get in here!" Wham! Grabs me and slams the door shut. No, he's just challenging us to cut the rope. See, we're limited times because we're unwilling to cut the rope. The safety brake is in place. He said, "I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. I'm going to stick closer than a brother." We don't have to worry about it. The disciples thought Calvary was a bust. They're standing on the hill that Friday, and they're saying to them, "Why did he?" 3 days later, they realized that the cross was plan A, the adjacent possible. You see, because without the cross, Mark says, but it's the empty tomb where God put his power on full display. Friends, we need to understand today that we can afford to cut the rope, because when it seems like it's game over, it's really in God's plan game on. Because here's the thing, Jesus' empty tomb is our adjacent possible, because he lives tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. I know he holds a future. Now life is worth the living just because he lives. Oh, you guys are too good of a choir. We got to sing it again. Because he lives. Come on, Charlene, I need to hear the alto. I can face tomorrow because he lives. All fear is gone. Because I know, oh, I know he holds the future. My life is worth the living just because he lives. Somebody is first. So what do? We begin every single day at a place where all things are possible and make a beeline for the empty tomb. We make a beeline for the empty tomb. Hebrews 11, 1 and 2 says this: faith shows the reality of what we hope for. It's the evidence of things we cannot see. Through their faith, the people in days of old earned a good reputation. Why? Because they were quick to cut the rope and trust God's break. Let me ask the worship team to come and get ready in just a moment, and you can start peeling back the tops of those communion cups. These are easier, by the way, than the other ones, hopefully. Mark tells a story in his book about scratching one of his life goals off of his list. He has a list of I think it's over 100 life goals, about half of which he's already accomplished, and I don't think he's finished his 50s yet. Mark tells about scratching off one of his life goals, and that was to paraglide over the Sacred Valley, which is adjacent to Machu Picchu in Peru. And he, with his son, had scaled the heights of Machu Picchu and were going to paraglide over the Sacred Valley. And his Peruvian guide, he said, which was a teenager that was half his height, in his broken English, told him as they were getting ready to paraglide over the Sacred Valley, he said this to him: run as fast as you can off the cliff, then lift your legs. To which Mark said, that's all you got? That's all you got? And the kid shook his head. Mark says, so I did what any loving father would do. I told my teenage son, you go first. He said as he followed the advice reluctantly, the whole time he was running pell-mell towards the cliff, he was saying in his head, this is crazy, this is crazy, this is crazy. And moments later, when he lifted his legs and he began to soar as the paraglide caught wind and he began to look down at the Sacred Valley from a view few of us will ever accomplish, he said that thought was replaced by another one. This is awesome. This is awesome. This is awesome. He says this: in order to experience the this is awesome moments, you have to risk the this is crazy circumstances. You have to cut the rope. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus prayed a prayer, said, Father, let this cup pass. But then he cut the rope. Nevertheless, not my will, your will be done. Can I just ask you these two questions as we close today and get ready? What is the situation in your life where you need to cut the rope? What is it that's holding you back? What is it that is not allowing you to experience the fullness of God's presence in your life? John 10:10 says this: I have come that you might have life and have it to the full. Let's not cheat ourselves out of God's best. Let's cut the rope and trust the break. On the same night that he was betrayed, he took the bread, and he broke it and said, this is my body, which is broken for you. Every time you do this, remember what I did for you. Let's eat together. Then he went on to say, as he took the cup, he said, this is my blood, which is shed for you for the remission of sins. I love that remission of sins phrase. It means paid in full. It's the same thing. When Jesus on the cross said, it is finished, it's the same words that used to be stamped on an invoice that meant paid in full, done, over. Take the risk and set us free. Hallelujah. Just tell him in your own words right there. Say, Lord, I thank you. I thank you for all that you do in my life and for the many blessings that you've given me, Lord. I'm going to pray for you in just a moment, and we're going to close this, and we are going over just slightly, and so I apologize for taking a couple extra minutes. But I have a real quick video I want to show you. It's from my favorite movie of all time, I think, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And this is a special scene that I think will illustrate very poignantly what we've been talking to you about today. Let's go ahead and run that. It's just like a minute, 50 seconds. Can you watch it with me, please?
Path of God. Only a leap from the lion's head may prove his worth. Impossible. Nobody can jump this. Indy! You must hurry! You must believe, boy. You must believe.